Anime loves romance. Even stories that do not have the facilities to tackle romance will attempt to pair two characters together and hope you're invested. Sometimes it works, and at times it feels like that they lost a bet. What makes a good romance? I guess it would be the titular question unless YouTube's A/B testing decided that another title was better. Is it about chemistry, or the best girl in a triangle, or is it about whether that relationship is supported by the story, or maybe all of them? I compiled a list of series, perhaps a list that's too long, that has romance as a primary focal point in some regard. When considering this video, I wondered if it should be purely battle shonen romance, or if it should be romance in general, and thanks to Vyvanse, I decided, well, why not both? Here's the full list of series that I'm going to talk about today, with timestamps in the description. It's possible that I may say something ignorant while talking about a series you like or dislike, so I'm sorry about that. These aren't usually topics that I talk about. I'll do my best, though. My Hero Academia might be the most questionable addition to the list, but I think there is interesting stuff to say about it. If you're wondering why it's on here, well, primarily it's because of Ochako's plotline. If it just ended with some stereotypical finale where the characters all get paired off with no real work done, it would suck, but it also wouldn't really fit the criteria of this video, I don't think. Deku and Ochako are more or less a complete and utter flop. Ochako develops feelings for Deku sometime around the provisional license exam arc, and Deku, it's really hard to say. Now, I want it to be clear that I don't do the whole Ochako sucks because she's in love with Deku thing that people like to do. I've defended her from that quite a few times, in fact. The romance in itself is just, well, pretty bad. It's shelved for literal real-life years and frankly quite awkwardly implanted into Ochako's arc. I do think the idea of it works, but with how backloaded the whole plotline is, it leads to, well, a pretty unsatisfying relationship, especially considering how little Deku and Ochako get to actually interact throughout the series. For Ochako, the romance with Deku and conflict with Toka serves to represent her inner conflict with suppression. Suppressing her own desires, suppressing her own feelings for Deku. It's a solid arc that has a wet fart of a conclusion, unfortunately, as she fails her ultimate goal and then her and Deku don't even get together after she decides to accept her feelings. That is, until the DLC releases for some reason. Frankly, the dynamic is carried by Ochako because this topic almost never comes up for Deku if he isn't just getting generally flustered by a girl. This isn't aided by Deku becoming a hollow puppet of a character, as Ochako has strong character moments and an allegedly well thought out and solidified arc, and Deku simply becomes a lifeless husk that just barely reacts to external stimuli. Me and my husband who goes hollow at the function, I guess. It's an exceptionally sloppy, poorly implemented relationship where Ochako does all the heavy lifting on an admittedly interesting concept. I talk more at length about Ochako and defend her from the ruined by romance allegations in this video if you're interested. It may be a battle shonen, so people might think that it doesn't necessarily need to be included in a video about romance, but there are plenty of battle shonen that include romance and do it better. As spoken about ad nauseum on this channel, My Hero Academia is a treasure trove of missed potential and underbaked storylines, and unfortunately, the Deku and Ochako plotline is one in a long list. And considering it plays a crucial role in the final conflict in the DLC ending, I don't really have an issue with including it here. So, what do we learn from MHA about romance? Well, it's probably good to write it. That feels like a fundamentally important step, but I think an extra step further is really emphasizing that a relationship is obviously two fucking people, right? You can't write one without the other. And also, I also think it demonstrates that I might just take any chance possible to slander Deku. And also, to beat some allegations before they start, I don't think Deku liking Ochako is an ass-pull or anything. I think it makes complete and total sense. I think it's good that they eventually did get together, they just suck. Yeah. Dandadan is a series I'm not particularly excited to talk about, and it's not because I think Dandadan is bad, I really don't. If anything, I think I'm going to defend it from some allegations here in this section, but my god, the past 50 or 60 chapters of this story have been a real piece of work. For clarity, I like a lot of Okarun and Momo's dynamic, even if I personally do think it's carried by Momo being a more interesting and fleshed out character than Okarun. Their relationship progress is cute. So cute! Unlike the aforementioned My Hero Academia example, these two characters do get to interact. They do play off of each other throughout the whole story, but of course, in fairness to MHA, a sentence I never thought I would say, these two are the main dynamic of the story, so perhaps I'm ribbing it a bit too hard. They slowly make ground throughout the story, chipping away at the progression element before stopping, encasing any and all relationship progress in ice. Dandadan threatened to stop the will they won't they of the series premise, so the story had to forcefully rip the two of them apart to prolong it even more. Okay, it sounds like I'm being a bit too harsh on it. I actually don't have a problem with having a confession and prolonging the answer for a bit, as we'll talk about later. But considering this confession came at the time of writing almost 100 chapters ago, or about 1/3 of the series' lifespan ago, I think it's fair to have some qualms with it. I'm pushing 30, man. I don't got much time left on this planet, and Dandadan wants to spend it creating what feels like continual, inauthentic roadblocks so that it can beat the same drum it had been beating for years at this point and swerving right back into the love rivalries and triangles of yore. Okay. Time to defend Dandadan. People give it a lot of shit because of these love rivalries and triangles, and simply wanting it to focus on Momo and Okarun exclusively. Realistically, if you don't like those things, I can't really stop you. However, I would make the argument that conflict in a story is fairly essential. Conflict serves to test your characters, it tests their values, their beliefs, it applies pressure to their character flaws, and they are expected to overcome them in some fashion. For romance stories, love rivals and love triangles are just another expression of narrative conflict. You might argue, we know that the main duo is getting together, so all this conflict does is serve the function of delaying the inevitable, and that would be correct, but this is also more or less how every story ever has functioned for most of human history. It's likely that Deku will beat the big bad and become a great hero. It's likely that Subaru will save the day. It's likely Chihiro will Kagurabachi all over everyone. For some reason, romance series are primarily the ones that suffer from this consequence-based mentality. Instead of valuing the journey to get there, it's all about the ending. Even so, the story doesn't have to end when they get together. You can portray two awkward teenagers coming to grips with being in a relationship with each other. The journey matters, but also, sometimes that journey can be through pothole-riddled streets. No, not streets. Roads that have no bike lanes. So you got 3 bikers on the sides of the road, and the sun's in your eyes, and also you get shot 15 times in the chest. Fuck you. Dandadan is praised in fandom circles for taking so long because it's a sloppy kind of romance because, you know, it's realistic teenage stuff. And then, honestly, you don't have to place roadblock after roadblock to have either of them grow. You can just do the fucking thing while they're together. They can have this unsure, poorly defined, and silly teenage love. The primary issue comes from this. When a confession drops in a story, you expect one of two things. Either an immediate move into the next step of their relationship, or a postponing of the answer while a character acts to figure out their own issues. Regardless, in both contexts, the story shifts into a new stage because romantic feelings are open and in the air. And so, we do get this new stage with Momo's somewhat apprehension when it comes to responding to Okurin's confession, leading to the mini-Momo arc. This arc is at least due to her own autonomy and her own agency as a character postponing the gratification. The amnesia arc is a whole other can of fucking worms. It is no longer a character-driven obstacle, and feels more like a forced plot-based obstacle, and readers can feel the difference between the two things, and it's annoying. If Momo has her uncertainties about their relationship going forward, that could be handled by Momo. If this amnesia arc is devised to help the separation of Okarun and Ken in Momo's mind, that can be done by a Momo that knows what is happening before her eyes, and perhaps not almost 2 years after the confession. I'm not intrinsically opposed to amnesia plotlines. I think it's a generally bad call to write off tropes by virtue of them being hard to execute. Skeptical about it, sure, but I read the Dandadan arc myself because I think it's unfair to immediately write something off like that. Having Momo be incapable of facing the issue she tried to run away from in the mini-Momo arc, delaying the response of the confession with a plot-based obstacle, and falling right back into the love triangle and love rival stuff that had already been cleared up hundreds of chapters ago, reads like absolute fucking garbage. Perhaps I'm being unfair because Dandadan isn't a series I'm intimately familiar with, unlike something like ReZero, but personally, I feel instead of teasing a moving on to the next stage and yanking us back to square one, the confession maybe should have been delayed, or perhaps it should have come after the less similar issues minus the love square that is causing everyone to gouge their eyes out. I'm not going to write off Dandadan forever because of this, and maybe the conclusion of this amnesia plotline is going to blow my fucking socks off and make me change my mind. It's always important to keep an open perspective, but Dandadan's romance has been spinning its wheels for such a long time and reintroducing the same conflicts and concepts over and over again, which to be fair, all stories technically do this if you really look in the abstract, but set dressing can generally distract you. What's the lesson to be learned from Dandadan? People do not appreciate the set dressing coming apart and what feels like a grating amount of delays and postponing. We will talk about some examples later in this video that I think do postponing confessions and keeping the set dressing together in much better ways. I think Dandadan's romance is not bad, but deeply flawed at this point in time, and truthfully, I do hope that things change. Spy Family is perhaps the series that will get me the most abuse on this list, primarily because I am way not caught up. I dropped it a long time ago, and to be honest, I'm not entirely confident in the things that I'm going to say here, so feel free to beat my ass, I guess. Full disclosure, I dropped it 3.5 years ago, so if new things have happened to fix some of my complaints, I wouldn't know about it, but you can keep this context in mind, and if I say something that sounds dumb because of it, you can just chuckle to yourself. At some point, this series kind of felt like Chinese water torture. I had a lot of fun when I first picked it up. I think the idea of two people forced into a marriage by circumstances out of their control, who grow closer over time, is actually fantastic, and the set dressing done by Spy Family is super cool. Being given a daughter figure and having to hide their occupations and all. The issue arises when you catch up on the material that the manga gives you. It's like the video of the truck about to slam into something, but it never really does. That's what Spy Family feels like. A series that has what appears on the surface to be a stereotypical nuclear family that is truthfully built on a bed of lies and inherent deception, a potential political message I find quite good and humorous, at least in my time with the series, did not live up to its potential with that premise, continually pushing and avoiding having any strong romantic moments with Yor and Lloyd. We can consider it a slow burn if you would like, but even when I'm doing a slow boil on the stovetop, I like receiving the visual feedback that you get of the water getting warmer. This did not exist in my time with Spy Family. Now the obvious response is, Spy Family is not exclusively a romance. I'm not saying it can't play with its other elements, but I do feel that it is dishonest that some people in the community like to assert that Yor and Lloyd's dynamic is not a primary focus to begin with. It makes me wonder if, in itself, the inherent flaw of a romance anime is that by virtue of having romance be a primary focal point of the series, you get less room to play around. In a series where romance isn't the primary focus, the final goal can be ambiguous. You can take many twists and turns to get there. You can maybe not even introduce the final goal for a long period of time. With romance, even if intentional or not, people feel like the final goal is apparent, and the twists and turns you take to put off that end goal feel more gratuitous or inherently harder to pace. Meaning that if you want to execute it in a more satisfying manner, the pacing required on the road to reach the goal is laden with much more difficulty. It feels like you're sandbagging the inevitable, especially with series like My Hero Academia, Dandadan, or Spy Family, having obvious next steps that can be taken to meet those checkpoints, but it instead decides to take detours around the world. This may sound at odds with my previous statement about conflicts, and about valuing the journey over the conclusion. However, the way I feel about Spy Family, rather than not valuing the journey, it feels more like I'm looking out the car window and it's clear that we're at a dead stop. The journey is important, but I like the reminder that we're still going somewhere. That's what felt missing from My Hero Academia. That's what feels missing currently from Dandadan, and that's also what felt like it was missing in my time with Spy Family. Exceptionally slow progression to no progression at all. The reason I picked these three series is because I do think they promise these things is the main thing. My Hero Academia could have avoided it if it weren't for Ochako, but Dandadan is explicitly about Okaru and Momo's relationship, and Spy Family, even if it didn't intend for it, was heavily packaged and shipped as a story about the family and their dynamics, so I think it's fair that some people want to see something happen. All the crazy shit going on in Dandadan, at least for a long time, did not stand to be the primary driver of whatever broader world it's trying to explore. It was that, plus a driving factor for Okaru and Momo's relationship, until it wasn't. With Spy Family, I thought we had an exploration of the family dynamic, and the use of their double secret lives to explore their dynamics and relationship, instead of the political or governmental thriller plot at large. If anyone out there has kept up with Spy Family, I would love to know, are my complaints misguided? Do things progress at a reasonable pace, especially in the future? And was I just paying the heavy tax of reading by release? Please do let me know in the comments below, because if that's the sentiment, I would love to give it another shot. Like I said earlier, the premise of the show is awesome, so I would really enjoy, enjoying it. The next series we're going to talk about is ReZero. Uh-oh. The series I talk about the most has entered the fray, and considering the discourse surrounding it, I think I'm about to wade into horrible and nasty territory. If you're wondering if I think ReZero has bad romance or good romance, well, it's kinda neither. Sorry to the people who expect me to glaze ReZero romance. I think it's gotten difficult. There are a considerable amount of anime-onlys who follow me, so I'm gonna try and be careful. ReZero, kinda like the My Hero Academia introduction in this video, is a bit muddy, because while it isn't particularly focused on romance, romance does play a big part in some of its central dynamics, or played. Emilia and Subaru for a good chunk of ReZero were a core dynamic of the series, and exploring both of their character flaws and romance was something underlining much of early ReZero. Much like a lot of Dandadan, ReZero uses its story arcs to develop the romance and also develop the characters, even if big strides aren't being made in the romance department. In arcs 1 through 3, there aren't gigantic progressions made for the two of them, but because they also serve to develop Subaru's character, it also puts the relationship on better footing. Early Natsuki Subaru instantly falls in love with basically the first woman who helps him. It leads to an improperly balanced relationship. He feels entitled to her love and attention. He bothers her in ways that she isn't okay with. He ignores her words and asserts he knows what's better for her. And arcs 3 and 4 push the hard reset button on their relationship. Subaru is forced to contend with the issues of self-worth, and the fact that, just like the antagonist Roswell, he was overriding Emilia's will with his own. All the while, Emilia is forced to confront her own lack of agency and her own immaturity, which is where the kiss happens and they get to start their relationship from a better foundation. I would be remiss to not include Subaru and Rem. As much as I do think that Subaru and Emilia are endgame, it's clear that Subaru and Rem have romantic feelings for each other, especially in the novels. I actually think the content they do have is pretty strong too, because while Subaru and Emilia get to form that new foundation for their relationship in the next arc, Subaru and Rem's relationship gets a pin put in it while it's in kind of a dark state. Subaru, through being Rem's hero, has a hero complex developing within him. It's like a flame lit in his belly that pushes him to be the hero that Rem expects him to be, pushing him to recklessness and destroying himself while Rem forms a toxic single-minded obsession relating to Subaru and will do anything and everything for the man that she loves. I think both of these dynamics are pretty strong. The issue with ReZero is that after Arc 4 and kinda Arc 5, that's it. We get Subaru progression, which is good. Emilia is stagnant and Rem is, well, a bit preoccupied. All of the romance plotlines are put on an extremely hard pause. The genuine connection and building of trust they had accumulated was more or less flanderized alongside Emilia, who becomes a shell of her former self, being the punch-kick merchant who gets to say stupid things so the rest of the cast doesn't have to. She is largely stagnant, though admittedly has her appreciated moments of emotional maturity. It feels as if Tape realized, oh shit, I'm only 5 arcs into my 12 arc story. We have to hit the brakes really, really fucking hard. And unfortunately, when he slams on the brakes, you're an unbuckled 5-year-old in the backseat, sent straight through the fucking window. ReZero has simply gotten lost in the sauce of exploring, well, its massive breadth of ideas. For me personally, who isn't that invested in ReZero's romance, it doesn't bother me all too much, but I must admit that it is noticeable how much the concept has seemingly been dropped, and how much that has impacted the Subaru and Emilia dynamic, and how much Emilia has stagnated. If I were a big Emilia fan, well, I would probably be upset. And if I were a big Rem fan, maybe I would be on suicide watch. Thankfully, I'm protected by my lord and savior, Natsuki Subaru, who continues to be Kino until this very day. Yozakura Family is an interesting example. We spoke about how the difficulties of a romance series becomes pacing the road well when its endgame is clear. Yozakura Family does something similar to Spy Family in that it's a family of assassins and spies, and due to extreme circumstances, Taiyo and Mutsumi are bound by marriage long before a proper relationship is formed. This puts them into a situation where they bond. They get to know each other and truly love one another. Taiyo especially being a fun character to read because the Yozakuras in his life with Mutsumi at large become very heartwarming vectors for him to recontextualize his relationship with family, having lost his long ago. And we get to explore this more or less pretty fun cast of this big family and how Taiyo and Mutsumi's relationship fits into it. Except Kyoichiro. This guy fucking blows. Taiyo and Mutsumi have a solid dynamic, and lots of little bits of romance and closeness of theirs is sprinkled throughout the story. You get good moments of progression through wholesome scenes of them expressing their affection for one another, or god forbid, hand-holding. They progress and have tender moments together alongside the plot's progression, being excellently juggled even if it does feel a little slow at times, but the background plot of the story is enough to keep you invested to see how these two end up. Wait, why is time going forward? Oh god, I'm scared. Oh no, don't tell me. Don't tell me we just time skipped and skipped quite literally the rest of the relationship's progress. Oh my fucking god, man, no way. So, yeah. Yozakura Family skips from them clearly becoming closer and more intimate, to them being deeply in love with each other with 2 kids of their own. All of that progress, all of those sweet moments, and that giant leap to them becoming parents is just skipped over. I'm not saying I need to see Taiyo and Mutsume plowing on my screen, I'm really not, but surely we can all see how unsatisfying it is to go from them still being in the kinda awkward, not exactly well-experienced early romance stage to being together for years and years and having children. Surely we can all agree that this is fucking insane. I had a lot of fun with Yozakura Family. It was one of the things I was most excited to read every week. This time skip killed all the joy I had for the series. It may be a little bit ignorant of me to talk about a series in a video that I haven't completely caught up with or even finished. Yozakura is one of them. I've been hard stuck at chapter 200, which came out going on 3 years ago now, and I've not been capable of picking it up or taking it seriously ever again. Some will argue, much like Spy Family, that Yozakura Family wasn't even a romance anyway, and to that I say, fucking cope. You may have a stronger argument for Spy Family that might make me concede, but not for Yozakura Family. This was absolutely a story about watching Taiyo and Mutsumi grow into their roles in the family, and by proxy watching their relationships grow. To skip over significant strides made in that relationship is a gigantic, and I mean gigantic, failure. What do we take away from Yozakura Family? I fucking hate time skips. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. Doing all this shit the reader would so obviously want to see off screen is fucking psychotic. Credit where it's due for things like ReZero, Spy Family, and Dandadan. At least we can see on screen that nothing is fucking happening. I would much rather have that than whatever the fuck this is. It's actually genuinely so fucking frustrating. Maybe there are some diamonds in these last 59 chapters, but I seriously don't have the strength to keep going. It is liquefied poison poured straight into my body, and it made me a reactionary hater towards time skips, despite my previous words about not judging a trope on its face. They're oftentimes icky and do more harm than good. I know it's contradictory, but that's seriously just how I feel. Fragrant Flower is a story about bias. It's predicated on the idea of 2 different schools who have been filled with nothing but myth and disdain for one another, with ReZero, the guy from the bad school that should actually be a dumb, rough bully, but he's actually compassionate, thoughtful, and has a passion for being a pastry chef. Kaoruko, the girl from the good school, should be a stuck-up, self-assured asshole, but she's a considerate, gleeful person who struggles with her own self-confidence and holds a passion for helping others. The story confronts these preconceived notions constantly, even through its side couples, which are admittedly not bad, something I find to be uncommon in series that have side couples. I usually find it to be somewhat meandering and hope to just get back to the main couple, but not in this series. The thing that makes Fragrant Flower a complicated experience for me is that it really exemplifies my prior point during the Dandadan section about a need for conflict. I'm sure there are some people out there who don't agree. In fact, I know there are, because reading a reception to Fragrant Flower, the response to the criticism of a lack of conflict is, well, there's already enough conflict in real life, so I don't need it in my stories. That's a fair perspective. One that I could never, ever understand, but you do you. After the new story shine of Fragrant Flower wears off and you've become familiar with its messaging, concepts, and dynamics, it really begins to sink in. The maturity of every character present is at a level that would never actually make any sense. And characters can do things that don't make sense, that's fine, but when there is basically no extended and sometimes even no short conflicts present in this story, it leaves me without much to sink my teeth into. They don't have any disputes, they have mild abrasions on the surface that are softened up by repeated apology after apology, repeated maturity after maturity, and never letting anything go wrong. It goes to show you why series introduce things like misunderstandings and love rivals, because conflict is a driving factor of a lot of stories. It doesn't have to be just those two things. There's this chart of conflicts in literature that depicts different types: man versus nature, or man versus man, or man versus self. I don't believe all conflicts must actually fall under these pictured categories, as I think that's too reductive. They should be a tool to perhaps find common links or learn more about types of conflict. They should not be adhered to as rigid archetypes. But people have misunderstandings, they have disagreements, they have unmet expectations, physical exchanges, and more. Fragrant Flower does not often delve into these kinds of things, and it leaves a lot of it feeling hollow, even though I more or less enjoy the characters in it, so if there's anything to take away from Fragrant Flower, it's conflict. Make the Exorcist Fall in Love is genuinely fantastic. Like, seriously. Our protagonist, literally nameless and only going by Mr. Priest, shoulders the expectations of the church by virtue of being the strongest exorcist. But at young age, he is told by his master that he should find love, something that a boy his age and indoctrinated into the beliefs he holds can't fundamentally understand, being raised in an abusive religious environment. Due to that powerful, unwavering faith that had been distilled in him, he even goes as far as to rip out his own eye due to his primary understanding of love being lust. His journey is one of unlearning religious trauma, understanding that what he would rather do is live a normal life. Ultimately, it's a story about the many implicit biases of life and how those influence you. Mr. Priest is confronted by many aspects of the culture, how men are expected to act and behave, to fulfill the role of a guardian no matter the toll that it may take to the person in question, the expectations of the way he will live his life due to his dedication to the church, the suppression of self that comes with all those, discouraged feelings of self-expression, weaponized scripture, and the constant guilt that comes with it all while learning to heal and move forward from his trauma without discarding all the good he's received because of his belief in God and his time in the church, which I think is something a lot of people appreciate about this story, and deals with the dark side of religious upbringings and experiences without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Personally, I grew up in an agnostic household, so it doesn't bother me any which way. Mr. Priest refuses to let himself be bogged down, and refuses to end up disregarding the consequences of his actions because of his absurd power, continuing to grow unlike some of his counterparts in the story, asking for people to critically engage with the systems of the world at large without turning to radicalism. Emory is the other aspect of the romance, a demon sent by Satan to make Mr. Priest fall in love to continue to wane his powers and remove him from his role as the strongest. Naturally, she does develop actual and genuine feelings as the story progresses, and she's forced to grapple with the contradictory mission of Satan and the life that she wants to guide Mr. Priest to live, being free from the torment that he'd experienced. The main fundamental flaw underlying all this is obvious. The relationship is built on a faulty foundation. Lies, deceit, and manipulation. Emory being an agent of Satan, literally, and how that underscores the bond that develops. Naturally, Make the Exorcist Fall in Love isn't over, so I can't say that this inherently shaky foundation is tied up satisfactorily. Knowing my experience with stories, it's very possible that this could actually end up sucking fucking dick by the time it wraps up, but for now, it's pretty damn good, and it seems to be moving in the direction of coming to grips with failures, trying to understand what it means to move forward despite all the harm and wrongdoing you've done. It should seek to tackle what forgiveness really means, to accept that sometimes moving forward means leaving things behind. Additionally, Make the Exorcist Fall in Love does the whole broader plot and putting the romance on the side thing way fucking better than most everything spoken about in this video thus far. There are times where the romance brakes are stomped on. There are times where the next stage is intentionally delayed, all of the most recent Dandadan arc. The world of this story is just so fucking interesting that I think it does a good job pacing out these two halves of the story. And even when romance doesn't seem to be front and center, these powerful arcs also seek to help us define, understand, empathize, and explore our protagonist to get him closer to understand what he truly wants out of life, to make him one step closer to accepting love of all forms. What's the takeaway of Make the Exorcist Fall in Love? You should write good. But seriously, you can write a series that isn't 100% about romance and still have it be compelling, and still progress things at a good pace. You could write a romance series that isn't exclusively about romance, with tons of compelling messages and ideas it wants to communicate, and with side casts and side romances of its own, and without conflicts that make people feel like the narrative is spinning its wheels. I don't know what's in store for the future of Make the Exorcist Fall in Love, but fuck is it good. I highly recommend it. How Do We Relationship is really, really good. We spoke earlier about the road to the finalization of a relationship being a clear goal of a series, and How Do We Relationship immediately throws a wrench into this base concept. Personally speaking, I think in a lot of situations, not necessarily all, ending the story where two characters get together is kind of the boring answer. I think it works for some series like Bloom Into You, but more often than not, I'm left hoping more was explored and delivered upon. How Do We Relationship agrees by starting them off in a relationship pretty much immediately, and it constantly plays with what the end goal of that story might be. The obstacles along the road aren't continually baiting the will they won't they. It's about college students and their ineffectual communication and inability to deal with their baggage while trying to have a functional relationship, hence the title. The obstacles become things like, can they make this relationship work out? Can they overcome these character flaws of theirs? And frankly, How Do We Relationship is perhaps the most realistic depiction I have seen of actual relationships. Of course, there are tons of things that portray relationships having issues, but for How Do We Relationship, they feel like deeply foundational ones that would rock the very base of any relationship. It's a story about people who are thrust into an awkward period of life. The period where you don't exactly know what you want or even who you are. These characters are flawed. There will be times where you want to see them succeed and times you have trouble rooting for them. By no means are they perfect beacons of morality or good decision-making, and they will do bad things or make mistakes because, first and foremost, they are portrayed as humans. And, notably, humans do not have a 100% success rate in every situation. Some would argue that's a fundamental aspect of humanity, being able to fuck up and interpret that fuck up in a way to improve yourself. You should not expect people to be perfect. I seriously think far too many of you do this, and when a misstep is made, they are damned for eternity. Psycho is someone who deals with unending anxiety, struggling with boiling jealousy and afraid of losing what she has, and simultaneously being afraid of holding back her girlfriend. Clashing with me was optimistic or idealistic mentality while struggling with her own feelings of inadequacy, and being unsure how to match the expectations of the relationship that she's in, and constantly running on an engine of self-doubt and self-hatred, as she wonders if she is the failure point in these things that happen around her. I'm very tentative about recommending series that contain sexual content or problematic elements because, well, I think there's a lot of puritanical movement on the internet. If you are someone who is willing to accept that depiction isn't necessarily endorsement, and you aren't someone who has to let everyone know how much you hate sex scenes in movies because you're stuck being 12, then I think you would like this series. It has such incredible depictions of early adulthood, the hurdles of self-discovery and also queer identity, miscommunications in relationships, incompatibility, all while having to juggle what is expected of you in life, succeeding in education and finding work, and so much more. It's a great series. Speaking of series with sexual content and potentially problematic elements, buying a classmate once a week, which I will call Shuukura instead. The title may be off-putting to you. In fact, the first chapter may be even more so. This is a story that I read the web novel of while in bed every night for weeks. At the time of writing, 413 chapters. Unbelievable captivation. When I hit the 300s, I decided to slow down my reading because I so badly didn't want it to end. Shuukura is a slow burn. I mean, fucking slow. There are long periods of time where you could feel the scorching blaze in your chest of how badly you want progress to happen, times where it feels like nothing is moving, until you look back and realize how many dominoes had to fall into place to get us to where we are now. I think it would be fair to call this a character study. And by God do we study Sendai and Miyagi. It's a series about two girls with a lot of their own issues who end up seeking refuge with each other under the guise of one of them being paid to do it. Allow me to spoil you ever so slightly if I may. The concept of being paid to hang out with each other is one that has been gone for longer than it has ever been in the story. It's a pretext that serves both their characters and their relationship. Additionally, it pretty quickly gets into strange physical territory, and they're at times outright harming each other. The foundation of the relationship is spawned by Miyagi, continually pushing Sendai's limits and having her lick her foot. At school, Sendai is of high social status, getting along with all kinds of people and being like a social butterfly, engaging in all kinds of shit she isn't actually interested in to maintain that status. Miyagi quickly comes to understand that she isn't exactly how she lets on at school, and that she isn't being the kind of person she truly is. So she finds joy in making Sendai do things she wouldn't normally do. Firstly, because Miyagi is not of social status, so to see someone like Sendai doing these kinds of things makes her happy, but additionally, because it pushes her away from the way Sendai acts in public, and towards the true version of herself that she keeps locked away. Sendai has fundamental identity struggles. All of her relationships in her life, including familial ones, are all surface level or fake. She's constantly put on the mask most appropriate for the situation, so in that lone room with Miyagi, she can just be Sendai. The issue with that becomes just who is Sendai Hazuki. It's not a question she herself could even answer, but it's a question that Miyagi continually pokes and prods at and makes Sendai face even if she tries to avoid it constantly. Miyagi herself has her own troubles. A girl who grew up in a broken household with her mom leaving and her dad never being around, it's caused her to be afraid. So very afraid. Every connection in her life feels so distant and ephemeral, like at any time it could all slip through her fingers and she could be left alone at home all over again. Because of this, chapters that take place from her perspectives are absolute fucking cyclones of contradiction and self-doubt. She's so constantly dejected and keeps those near her at a metaphorical arm's length. She's permanently afraid of expressing her innermost thoughts, accidentally rubbing up too close to someone, but also is too racked with fear and anguishes over letting them go. She has a gnawing possessiveness over Sendai because of that, developing an insane jealousy streak and even hating the prospect of Sendai working part-time because it would show a side of her that Miyagi wouldn't be familiar with. And simultaneously, while she struggles with these feelings, she also wants to keep her at arm's length and constantly pushes away any interpreted advances. The prospect of letting her in is way too scary. Because what if she's just like her mom and dad? Sendai also slipped through her fingers and that connection becomes lost. It's too terrifying to substantiate that connection because of what could happen. The two come together and it ends up being the only place that they can truly express themselves to one another, minus a few details they decide to withhold, and this comes out in some frankly toxic ways. It's not the most toxic romance series I've ever read, but there are certainly toxic elements. They're both somewhat controlling, dismissive, and deeply flawed individuals that have great struggles of their own to deal with. Miyagi, who honestly reads as neurodivergent at times, has to struggle with these contradictory feelings that swirl around in her mind, and while Sendai also confronts her own familial issues and struggles with her own sense of identity. Wow, I spoke about a lot of series, huh? Surely I didn't piss anyone off a single time. Sorry if I said something ignorant about something you enjoy. I tried to do my best, but you know. Can't win them all. This whole thing was to find out, what do I like in a romance story? I'm a fan of deeply personal and well fleshed out character studies and dynamics. It makes the romance feel all the more real and driven when you can get into the mind of a character as well as you can for people like Sendai or Mr. Priest or even Natsuki Subaru. I'm a fan of romance series that aren't afraid to tell the story of what happens after a couple gets together, to navigate some of those tricky situations, but it's not a requirement. I'm a fan of stories that understand how to juggle the obvious goal ahead of us and the necessary roadblocks and developments that follow, whether it be love triangles, misunderstandings, or conflicts of any kind, really. I prefer stories that aren't happy and go lucky all the time, just ignore that I love polar opposites. Conflict, stakes, and roadblocks that feel authentic and character-driven are awesome. Believe it or not, I like stories where the couple actually gets to talk to each other. Sorry, that might be a burning hot take. I like stories in which we get satisfying progress, that know how to progress to the next stage without immediately kneecapping itself. I enjoy series that are willing to play with the flaws inherent to humanity, that aren't afraid to show off the bad sides of people, to give them actual issues to deal with. Not every story is going to hit, and that's okay. But they might hit for you. It's possible that I'm just a dumb ape, and maybe something I talked negatively about on here is actually goated. I'm an enjoyer of romance media, and if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear about them in the comments. I don't know how many I'll get around to, but, you know, I can at least think about it. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe for more. You can also check the description down below to become a member, which gives you benefits like early videos, membership badges, and cool custom emotes. You can join the Discord where we talk about ReZero, Kagurabachi, Jujutsu Kaisen, and all kind of stuff. Additionally, you can go to the channel store and pick up some awesome stickers made by our channel artist, so you can carry the power of Graphia with you on your water bottle. That's about it though. Thank you for watching. See ya.